My name is Martha Schaefer, and I I was married for 43 years, and my husband passed away in 2008. I have 2 children and 7 grandchildren, and not sure what else to say. But my husband's name was Bronson, and I still miss him, but I'm moving on, and I love being here.
Thank you, Martha. My name is Marie. Can you hear me? It's working, thanks. My name is Marie Wool, and my husband's name is Tom. I've been married for, in August, 50 years. Yeah, so it's a long trek that we've been on together, and it hasn't always been marvelous, but that's just life, you know, and I love him more than anybody in this whole wide world. And we have 3 daughters together. 2 of them are married, 1 of them is not, so they have given me 2 grandchildren, 2 little boys and 2 little girls, and they both live far away from me, so I kind of mourn that a little bit. But anyway, I'm a grandma a biological grandma to 4. I have 5 non-biological grandchildren who are all married now, and they have 11 grandchildren, which are my great-grandchildren. Because my daughter married a man who had 5 kids because his wife had died. And so all of those kids are now married and out of the house. But anyway, I was a stay-at-home mom for most of my career. My husband wanted me to be at home and didn't want me working outside because he knew I couldn't do 2 things well at one time. So I was an x-ray tech I worked as a relief x-ray tech most of that time, so just 2 weeks at a time, or sometimes a month or 2 at a time, something like that. And did I cover everything? Oh, there you go.
Good morning. My name is Angela Smith, and my husband's name was Philip. We were married 27 years, and he's been gone for 16 years. I have 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls, a set of twins, and I have 11 grandchildren, and that's just from the 3 older ones. The younger 2 boys are not even married. And my oldest grandchild is 16, and the youngest is 2. I was trained as a teacher, a high school teacher, but I got married and I never had to teach. But my husband had me teaching all of my children before they went to school, so they could all read and they were ready, for school. They're all good kids, and the twins live in Georgia, and between them there's 7. And then my oldest child, a daughter, lives in San Diego, and she has 4 children. And then I have a son who lives in North Carolina who's not married, and my youngest boy lives in Mission Valley. So that's me.
I'm Paula Huntley, and I am married. My husband is Paul. So we are Paul and Paula.
That's so cute. It's a song.
You're right. You're telling your age. But yes, it usually gets quite a reaction. But we've been married 45 years. And we have 3 boys, age 40 to 34. The 2 older are married, and my youngest is still a bachelor. Usually I get offers for that. Not here. But anyway, I have 2 grandchildren. Our middle son has a boy and a girl. They're 5 and 3, and they are in Visalia, so I have to travel to be with my grandkids. But I love FaceTime. That's been really great. Before children, I actually worked with ophthalmology doctors. I assisted them, and also was an optician. After children, when the boys were older, we realized we were going to have college to pay for. I went back to work, and I had a great opportunity of working for a nonprofit organization called Moms in Prayer. The headquarters is in Poway. I live in Poway, so it was real convenient. And in between those years, I did a lot of volunteering, even a PTA president at the elementary school. So very involved with that type of thing. Is there anything else? I think that might be it. Thank you.
Is this working? Okay, all right. My name is Lynette Fraser. My husband's name is David. I have been married 47 years. I have 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. That one over there, that's one of my grandchildren. And the other one is, Juliet, is in the daycare. I am a teacher. I'm a substitute teacher. I have been teaching. I started in the barrio in San Diego and then moved up here to Escondido, mostly subbing here around town. Interesting city. And 47 years, yeah. So did I get it all? Oh, well, I want to say, I was one of the original mops. I don't know if we call them mopettes or what, but with Marcia Keating and a few of the other women here. And I wanted to participate in this because I wanted my daughter to experience what I got to experience with a fellowship that you guys give each other, the inspiration, the hope, the camaraderie, everybody's doing this, you're in the same basket, you're all going along the same journey. And it is very encouraging to learn from each other. They were my teachers at that time. I was a new Christian. So it's, you are not alone in this journey.
My name is Linda Vandermeer. I have 3 children, a boy and 2 girls. And I have 2 grandchildren. One is 19 and a freshman at Pepperdine, and the other one is 10. And my husband, Stan, and I will also be married 50 years in August. Yay, Marie! So when my children were at home, elementary school, I started my own cleaning business. I did that for 12 years. And then I became an administrative assistant for different Christian organizations, and I believe my very favorite job was working with Wycliffe Bible translators. And I did that for 7 years. And I think that's it. Okay.
Look, I would like you to get to know me a little better too. I was a stay-home mom and loved it, and I also went back to school after my daughter got married many years ago, and I did volunteer work throughout my whole, ever since my children were in elementary school. I volunteered in hospitals, in a maternity ward. I was on a team at a hospital in Santa Clarita at a trauma center for sexual assault and domestic violence and things like that. So I was very busy as well. And I also loved to sing. So that's it. Okay.
How do I support a husband who is unhappy in his career and has trouble taking risks to change anything? And Paula is going to help us with that question today.
That is very challenging, and it's going to require a lot of prayer. So number one, you're going to be his number one helpmate and your number one prayer partner for him. And it's going to take a lot of prayer. You're going to need to be a good listener and hear him out and gently offer help or suggestions. I find that they need to be heard first, and then you need to be careful with your advice. It is hard to give your husband advice. Their career and their pride are very big in their lives, and so you need to be careful with that, and so you need to bathe it in prayer. But as you gain his confidence in your listening and in your encouragement and praising him for what he is strong at and what he can do, helping to remind him of the things that he can do and does well, I would suggest that you help him, encourage him to meet with other men. Find another man to mentor him. Find another group of men that he can be part of, just like you're here together. What an encouragement and help that is for each of you. Our men need to do that as well. And there's a lot of good programs that they can be part of. And finding another job and taking a step out of what he's in now is a big risk and a big change, and it's hard. And to have the other support of you and some other men and have networking for other opportunities and jobs, maybe it might even be going back to school and learning something new. It can be done. It has been done many times, but I would just say, yeah, be the helpmate, the prayer partner, and a good listener, and God will get you through it.
Thank you very much. The second question is, what are some things that you do with your husband to get to know each other even better after years of marriage? Lynette.
Okay, so when we moved up here, this church had a program called Marriage Mentoring, and that was something that we went through. It is available for you, and I highly suggest it, even if you're not having any challenges, because you explore yourselves, your backgrounds, and you learn about each other going through that program. And so we did that. Then we became marriage mentors. We did that for several years. And then at the same time, this church had all sorts of programs for couples to go together. Love and Respect. They had, speakers come in, and, like Valentine's Day they used to do. They're not doing it so much anymore. Maybe we need somebody in leadership out there. But you need to spend time with each other away from the children, and you have to purpose to do that. And you have to purpose to take, like my husband was really good. He would just show up on a Friday night, and my daughters would have my bags packed, and we would go. And it's like, oh, but not everybody's husband's like that. They rarely are, but that is, but you could do the same for your husband. You have to keep your marriage hot, should I say? I have the never say no philosophy, and no matter what it takes, you never say no. That's how you keep them home. That's really, really good advice. That's what my mother-in-law told me when we first got married. So it's interesting advice from your mother-in-law. So, you have to, there's enough good in every person to love them, and there's enough bad in every person to hate them. And you have to choose to concentrate on the good and not the bad, and, bring out the good. And what Paula said about your husband, praying for him, encouraging and listening to him. Men want respect more than they want love. They will take respect every day over you loving them. And that is a key issue to a successful marriage.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Paula, did you want to add something?
Yes. When we were discussing these questions, you're not at this place yet, but my husband and I were getting to that place of retirement. The kids had all moved out to the empty nest, and the marriage was like, okay, how do we do this? We've never done this one before. And we were looking around, and we were actually looking at other married couples that were our age and saying, oh, well, maybe that one's not a good example. Well, maybe that one's not such, well, okay, yeah. So when we did find a couple that we thought they had a good marriage at this point in their lives, we actually asked them and said, what is it? And so they suggested this book, His Needs, Her Needs by Harley. And maybe some of you have heard it before. We had never heard about it. There are seminars, I believe, and there's also workbooks to go with it. And Paul and I picked this one up, and it was suggested that we read it. I read it first and highlighted what was important to me. Then he read it and highlighted what was important to him. And then we found that we had a road trip where we were in the car for like 12 hours. And we actually went through the book and discussed it between the two of us. Oh, you underlined that. Why? Oh, really? And I'm telling you, 30 years, you would think you've got it all down, right? No, we still had aha moments. Oh, really? I didn't realize that. You know, it was great. It really reinvigorated our marriage, our relationship. It also showed us the things that we needed to work on. But what I think I like about the book, too, is that it points out that our needs change. What your needs right now with your little ones and your husband is different than what my needs are with my husband now. And so it's a good book to actually keep as a resource on your bookshelf. And periodically in your marriage, pull it out and review it. And that's what I would recommend, and it's really good. I've given it to all my married sons.
Thank you. Now, the next question is, how did you keep the spark alive during your early years of parenting? So they've shared more about the later years. Now let's go back to the early years. How did you keep that spark alive? And Angela and Marie are going to share.
This can get pretty personal because a relationship between a husband and a man is a very personal thing. And as I think back about it, we certainly did have our ups and downs. But I just remember that there was sometimes, you know, when it just seemed to be kind of boring and dead, and you sort of had your times of disagreement or fighting or just any little thing that seems like could set one of you off, and then there'd be this coldness, you know, between the two of us that lasted sometimes without even speaking to each other for 3 days. And it made me just sick inside to think of that. And then one time when this was happening, you know, I realized after 3 days that, you know, this is the man I married. This is the man I love. And so I just approached him and I said, "Hun, remember me? You loved me." And I said, "Honey, and I love you. Let's get over this." And, you know, from that point on, it just seemed like whenever there was an up and a down, you know, I would just try to think of those things that were attractive to me when I was dating him and that made me fall in love with him. And some of those things that I just found when I kind of wanted to turn him on, I guess, is, you know, like maybe one day I'd go around braless, you know, and let him know I was doing such a thing, you know, and I tell you, it made him, it turned him on, you know, and this seemed to be important to him. Another thing, when I was asking him the other day, I said, "Honey, do you remember the things that, you know, turned you on when, you know, that made it kind of jump out?" He says, "Remember when you used to get in the shower with me?" I go, "Oh, yeah." and that was really a neat thing. Another thing that I did that an older lady taught me when I was young, she said, "Meet your husband at the door." Most of the time I was a stay-at-home mom. And meet your husband at the door with fresh, you know, comb your hair, you know, or put some makeup on, or something that looks pretty on you rather than your grubbies that are all day. And another thing my husband loved was he wanted me to, because I was a stay-at-home mom, he wanted me to be there when he left and just to, "Bye, honey." You know, these are silly little things, but he's still that way today. My husband is a Patriot Guard rider on his motorcycle, and he always prays before he leaves to protect him on the freeway when he's riding his cycle, and he wants me there to wave goodbye to him. And when I think about that, I thought, you know, there are times when I have witnessed a motorcycle accident on the freeway, and I'm so glad that it wasn't him, and that I waved goodbye to him and closed the garage door after he left, and those are little things that are just minute, but they're very special to him because it makes him feel important. And so I continue to do that to this very day. Another thing that I found was sort of a romantic thing was that I knew what foods he loved, and I love to fix the things that he loves, and sometimes make just a special little thing. But he always, there's maybe a half a dozen foods that are on his go-to list, and that are very special to him. So when I serve those again and again, and not all of them are the ones that I really favor or really have an appetite for, but when I serve that to him, it just, a way to a man's heart is through his stomach, And I tell you, I learned that because I had 2 older brothers growing up, and it's just a real turn on, to him. He's a big guy and not fat, but he's just big, and he loves his food, and so that's been a thing. Another thing is that my husband was an air traffic controller for 40 years, and that's a very high-stress job. Although he loved it so much, he used to say, I can't believe they pay me to do this, and that's how much he loved his job. But his vacation to him was very important, and he didn't want a vacation where you drove, and then you got there, and then you stayed for a couple days, then you had to drive back home. That was not a vacation to him. And so because of that, we did a lot of camping, and every summer when our girls were little, we went to Yosemite and camped. Just sat there, and we cooked our food outdoors. We just had a tent, and we brought our bicycles with us, and every day every evening he would build that fire, and he'd say, there's nothing better in the whole world than to sit around the campfire, because there was no stress. There was just the wonderful smells of the mountain air, and you do your little s'mores on the fire, and those are the kind of vacations that was very pleasurable to him, and I learned to love it because I'd grown up never camping. It was not a thing that we ever did, but it was just one that we still love to go. Just last summer we went up to Yosemite. The summer before, we went up to Yosemite, and we hadn't been there for a few years, and it brought back so many wonderful, cherishable memories that were really special to both of us. And our kids are gone, but it was just one of those wonderful things that, a memory that you just constantly bring up because you want to please him, and you have to make it alive and still know that even after almost 50 years of marriage, there's still wonderful things that nobody else can share with you except your husband. And I think that's all I was going to talk about that. Yeah, I think so. Angela, did you want to add?
Didn't leave anything for me. One thing I would like to tell you that'll keep the spark alive in your marriage is I don't think you can tell your husband too much that I love you. You think, well, they're big, strong men, and they go to work every day, they take care of the family, but they're just like us. They need to hear that you love them. And I had wished that I had told my husband that I loved him more because, and I really did. I mean, I felt like my husband was, like a marriage made in heaven. That person is just for you. And after he passed away, that's when my children and I tell each other we love each other. Like we'll call on the phone, and before we hang up, we say, I love you. Even my boys say that. And you just don't know how much you're going to miss somebody until they're gone. And you just really need to tell your husband, I love you. And I know it may be hard and it may sound mushy or something, but I think you should really try to make that a habit. And another thing is, I think that will keep your marriage alive is be willing to say, I'm sorry. even if it wasn't your fault, or even if you don't think the argument or what happened was your fault, because you want to keep a good relationship between you and your spouse. And usually I was always the one that was saying something bad to my husband. He was very kind, very patient, and hardly ever said anything that, was out of line, which made me mad because I was always saying something. And he was the silent type. He just wouldn't, it would just make him, just being within himself. And I can't stand anybody to be mad at me, so I'm going to say I'm sorry. So I would always say I was sorry, and that man never held a grudge. He always never held it against me, forgave me right away, but I could tell he was hurt because he would be silent. So, ladies, don't be afraid to say you're sorry. Another thing is take care of yourself. I mean, you don't have to be perfect like when you were dating, but men are very visual. And so like Marie said, wear something nice, not really scruffy. It doesn't have to be, you could wear jeans and a t-shirt, but don't let it be frayed or old or spots on it, because men are very visual, smell good. They want that woman that they married. I mean, you could put on a couple of pounds, that doesn't matter, but you're an extension of him. And just think how you would feel if he put on old clothes and had spots on his clothes and didn't take care of his hygiene, didn't comb his hair. So if you want to keep that spark alive, then take care of yourself. And because like one of the other moms said, I think Lynette said, you don't want him to start looking at other women, You want his eyes only to be on you. And they really appreciate it because, I had 5 kids, and I always worked to, get my weight down, and I really did it for me, not really at the time thinking that how Philip felt. But one time he told me, he said, "Thank you. I really appreciate you, getting your weight down." And so that matters to them. You don't have to be the weight you were when you first got married, because I'll never be that weight. And so, but just, they do like how you look, because that's an extension of them, and that makes them proud. Another thing that I and my husband did, I had 4 brothers, and they liked sports, but I was really a girly girl, and I didn't care anything about sports. And I married a man who...
Married a basketball player.
Yeah, God does have a sense of humor. But because I loved him and liked him so much, I liked that he liked basketball, And after we had the kids, he would always watch football on TV and basketball, right? And those games are 2 hours long, and so that takes up a lot of time. So what I did? I would sit with him. I didn't care anything about football or basketball, but I liked being with him. And I would just sit on the couch right next to him, and that made me feel good just to be sitting with him. And I think they appreciate that, you doing things together. So I would encourage that. And then I think you should find out, like Marie said, what makes your husband tick. That those books that came out about the love languages? Well, you don't need to read those books to know what makes your husband tick. You know what makes him happy. And my husband, he liked acts of service, like scratching his back. And I go, I don't want to scratch his back. His mom always scratched his back, and I go, But oh my gosh, so I would have to do that, I would scratch his back, and he really liked that. And I think you should tell your husbands that you appreciate them, and that you're happy that they go to work every day and they provide for the family. Because like Lynette was saying, men need respect. They need to know that you respect them and that you appreciate them. You know, we want to be appreciated, and we're always thinking, why don't they appreciate me? But they're just like us. They need appreciation too. So I think you should tell them that. I got to tell you a funny story, and then I'll hand over the mic. But when we were dating, can you believe back then in the 70s they had co-ed dorms? And so we lived in the same dorm, and he lived on a lower floor, and I don't know what possessed me, but I wrote him a note, you know, and I stuck it under his dorm door. And this man, who was 6'5", was so happy that I wrote him a note, this big old guy, and he just was over the moon that I took the time to write him this note. And the sad part about it is that after we got married, and for 9 years he was always on the road, like he'd be gone like sometimes 2 weeks at a time, 1 week at a time, 3 days at a time, and I could have written him a note, you know, and stuck it in his luggage. But I never even thought about that. And I bet that would have made him so happy, because sometimes he would leave to go on a road trip and I would go, Philip, don't leave. But he wouldn't even look back. He would just keep going, you know. And then it got to a point, it's like, Philip, don't leave, because it's like, don't leave me with these kids. But I so wish I had written him a note and saying, like, honey, I really hate that you have to leave, but I know you have to, but I can't wait for you to come home. You know, just something simple like that. So I think we women think that men don't really appreciate those little things, but they really do. So really find out what makes your husband tick, and I guarantee if you start doing the things that you know speaks to is his love language, he will reciprocate, and he will be more inclined to, you know, fulfill your love language.
Okay, thank you.
My husband has a funny saying. He says, men marry women and hope they stay the same, and women marry men and have a list of things they're going to change.
Amen.
Did you ever have a dry spell with your husband where it was really hard to love them, either because of his actions or a hardening of your own heart? And how did you get past that? Okay.
Needless to say, in 40 years, 50 years, I'm sure we can all come up with a lot of stories. But I have one in particular, and it's a very simple one. I had gotten a ticket. I think I was 5 miles over the speed limit or something. So I had to go down to court, down into LA actually, and my husband went along with me. My husband was a handsome guy. He was very smart, and he always was ready with his answers. And I wasn't all the time. So anyways, we stood in line with I don't know how many, you know, hundreds of people who all were there to see the judge. And so a policewoman was standing in front of me, and she was asking information. And I just want to say, one of the things that often really bothered me was that my husband would try to speak for me, or, you know, this is what Martha meant to say, you know, and that really, you know. And so the police, the officer, she asked, what is your name? You know, what's your address? And immediately my husband, Martha Schaefer, so and so and so. And the policewoman looked at him and she said, I want her to answer me. You know, and I thought, wow. It took me a while to find my voice, and I think it was hard because he was so quick, ready all the time. And it was really a source of, you know, it just really, really ticked me off, as they say. And I think we eventually talked through it, and I helped him to realize that, you know, I can speak for myself. My opinions matter. What I say, I want to say. I don't need you to correct it. You know, we did work through it. We prayed about it, which is always important to do. But anyways, and I have a feeling I'm not the only one where a husband, you know, is a little too quick to I loved for him to take charge, but there were times when I needed him, to let me do it. So, anyways.
Okay. As I shared, we're going to be married 50 years. And so one of the gifts we're giving our children is Stan and I are sitting down and going through each decade of our marriage. What did God do for us in this decade, that decade? What were highlights of our marriage, of our family? So this has really been stretching. As you can imagine, some of you in this room have not been married 10 years, and I'm looking at 50 years. So, the dry spells. There were so many dry spells in our marriage. I have to say that there were literally years, and I'm going to say when our children were the age of your children, maybe a little bit older, that I was literally, and I know you are sometimes, consumed with motherhood. And Stan was a nice person over here helping me out with my washing and ironing, and he helped. Yes, he did. He's very helpful. But what I'm saying is that as moms, we can be so consumed with the care, the physical care, the draining of that alone, that we really struggled with dry spells. And it says, how did you come out of that? How did you survive? I have to say that my friends really helped me out because they were my sounding board. And when I was going through difficult times with him, I had a group of friends who I talked to, who we prayed together, because you know what? They were going through the same thing. And so we had this bonding. And also, I have to say that there were times when things were so dry that I couldn't pray. I couldn't read the Bible. I was just kind of functioning. And if it wasn't for my friends, if it wasn't for their prayers and support, I really don't know where I would be today. They really helped me. And so my heart, when I come to our MOPS group, is I understand how important we are to each other. You may look back, as I do now, years from now, and look back at raising your children and the tough times that you're going through, and realize that you too would not have made it if it hadn't been for your friends and for their prayers for you. I wish I could say that my faith got me through, but my faith was pretty weak at that point in my life. And I just am so thankful that I can look back now and realize what God has done in my life. So another kind of thing I'd like to encourage you is look back on your marriage, as Stan and I are, and think about how God has blessed you and what He has done, and focus on, the good things, and because there's a lot of bad things, but when we focus on the good things, our lives and perspective really change. So God bless you all.
My husband used to joke that in our house he came after the children, after the cats, after the dogs, and if there were a bird, after the bird too, and that was a signal to me to say, I think he needs attention. So, and he was jealous of the children. And I don't know how many, I am sure that is a widespread experience with men, that they think they come last in the family. And we as women have to change that. And so there was a time in our marriage where I was very, very discouraged, angry, upset. And for somehow I got found some resource. And long before, if you've seen the movie Firestorm, isn't it Firestorm? How many have seen that movie? Fireproof. Fireproof. How many have seen that movie? All right. If you haven't seen that movie, go see that movie, because that's what I did to my husband before that movie came out. And it was a life-changing experience. It was 30 days of purposing to love him no matter what he did, no matter what he said, no matter what his reaction was. I was going to be kind and loving and caring and put him as a priority. And it was a major turnaround for us, because he realized after about 25 days that I was doing something. and he appreciated it. I think he was upset when it stopped. So didn't totally stop. But, marriage is a journey. It is today, it is tomorrow, it is next week. You make every day count. You just don't go on and that, it'll happen next week. No, they need to know you love them today. And for you ladies out there, I mentioned this in the beginning when we did our opening prayer. Some of your husband's love language is not Valentine's Day. Please don't put your expectations on them for what they should perform, how they should act on this day. It's a made-up holiday for people to make money, to sell cards. It's nice for you guys to tell each other how you love each other, but it isn't the end all. If he doesn't bring you flowers, candies, and everything else, it's just another day for him, for most of your husbands. And so if he does something, hey, great. Be really appreciative. If he doesn't, get over it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. And I think this is a really special way to celebrate Valentine's Day. I mean, this is real love. Raw, rejoicing, and delighting in. And thank you for being so transparent and just sharing your hearts so openly with all of us. Our time has flown. We do have a couple more questions that I'm sorry, we won't be able to get to. But I do know that our mentor moms, they're willing and open to talk to you at any time. So before our MOPS time, after our MOP time, if perhaps you'd like to connect with a mentor mom who's not at your table, you can do that as well. I do just have one more question. This is a very lighthearted one. If you could just answer within 5 seconds. The last question here is, what is an easy go-to, coming home late and didn't prep anything, best dinner option? Go.
Bacon and eggs and waffles or pancakes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Peanut butter and jelly, Martha said.
And grilled cheese and pork and beans and hot dogs and taquitos. My kids have a lot of taquitos.
Order out.
Order out.
Macaroni and cheese. Order out. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Let's give our mentor moms a big hand.